Good evening. The head of the Equal Opportunities Commission, York Chow, has condemned a recent petition signed by a number of lawmakers and members of the public that's now being accused of discriminating against mainlanders. But those involved deny wrongdoing. Evelina Lung has more.
This petition has now stirred up a hornet's nest. Published on September 3rd by legislators Gary Fan and Claudia Mo, activist Roy Tam, as well as about 300 people, it said an influx of individual mainland visitors has caused chaos in Hong Kong. The article also called for a review of the quota for one-way permits granted to mainlanders, those who are allowed to settle in Hong Kong from across the border. The Mainland Hong Kong Families' Rights Association complained to the Equal Opportunities Commission, saying the article discriminates against new migrants. Today, the Commission's chairman, York Chow, said it does contain discriminatory remarks. To criticize others because of their background or special characteristics amounts to discrimination, he said. So these comments shouldn't appear anywhere, and we should condemn them. And public figures should not make those remarks, Chow added. Mo hit back.
I think Dr. Chow's not being very fair to us. I actually suspect that he probably hasn't actually read the content of that advertisement, which mainly was criticizing the government for the snatching land available for building for housing purposes indiscriminately, right? And we were saying the government was doing that. Why? Because there's this population growth, and including we have this daily 150 quota of family reunion mainlanders coming into town, right? And we just couldn't cope.
Tam also denied suggestions that the piece constitutes discrimination. Evelina Lang, TVB News.
In the heated debate over Hong Kong becoming a market for mainland shoppers, the head of the Retail Management Association has called on people not to forget free trade is what makes the city outstanding. Diane To reports.
Is Hong Kong capable of receiving more tourists? According to the Hong Kong Retail Management Association, yes, but it requires better planning.
In the last 10 years, where mainland tourists start to flock into Hong Kong, sales grow around 158%. Volume, we grow around 106%. Really double, very good. But our points of sales, which means the number of shops, we only increase 13.5. And working population in retail only grew 22%.
Speaking to TVB News today, Max said places such as North Lantau have a lot of room to be developed. She said retail space is often overlooked in land planning, and that proper planning could result in cheaper rents and a better environment for both locals and tourists. Mac also chairs the committee looking into the city's baby milk powder supply, and she said members are working on striking a balance between two objectives. One is to give priority to all Hong Kong-born babies, those born either to local or mainland parents, to ensure adequate supply.
Second one is Hong Kong is a free port. It's a very hard-earned reputation, and we must protect it as well. So between the two objectives, how can we find a solution? But we have been thinking how we can, from the supply chain, to support the outcome of the two objectives.
Mac explained that the government's pressure test has to be kept confidential to help ensure its findings would be accurate, and that may be why the public has misunderstandings about it. And after the government presents the results in December, Mac said her committee will submit a proposal to LegCo to lift the toucan milk powder ban. Diane To, TVB News.
To yet another dispute involving Hong Kong and mainland residents, this one over kindergarten places. The Secretary for Education has denied claims that 6 measures unveiled by the government yesterday to fight a shortage of places came too late. Eddie Ng also expressed confidence the enrollment process will improve next year. Vicky Kung has that story.
Queues like this could mean days of waiting. Kindergarten places in Shengshui are scarce because many mainland parents want their children to study here in Hong Kong. This puts pressure on the 46 kindergartens in North District, the area closest to the border. But the Education Bureau is now optimistic that the enrollment process will improve next year, partly due to a lower birth rate of the so-called Type 2 babies, kids born in Hong Kong to mainland parents.
We believe that this is particular for this year because it just hit the peak of the Type 2 baby sort of the birth rate.
There are 35,000 such kids eligible for this year's enrollment, which is 9,000 more than next year's projected figure. North District has only 4,000 first-year kindergarten places this year for both Type 2 babies and 2,300 local children there. Anticipating fierce competition, some locals also fear mainland parents may seek admission to kindergartens in other districts, such as Tuen Mun and Yuen Long next year. But officials say they have no plans to implement the 6 special measures announced yesterday, including the one child, one offer scheme outside North and Tai Po districts. The education chief reiterated that traveling long distances to school will have a negative impact on children's learning and urged mainland parents to think twice before sending their kids over to Hong Kong. Vicky Kong, TVB News.
Overseas, and at least 34 people drowned and 206 were rescued when a boat overloaded with refugees capsized off the coast of Italy yesterday. As Alan Booknia reports, it's the second time in a little more than a week there's been a major shipwreck involving migrants trying to reach Italy or Malta from the north of Africa.
The boat was about 105 kilometers off the coast of the Italian island Lampedusa, the destination of choice for most smugglers' boats leaving Tunisia or Libya. Helicopters took the injured to hospitals in Lampedusa, which has a holding facility for refugees. This shipwreck and last week's that saw more than 300 die are grim reminders of the risks migrants take to escape the abject poverty or persecution and conflict they face at home. Smugglers charge about $1,500 per head and cram the migrants onto boats barely seaworthy and lacking life-saving equipment. They routinely run into trouble and require rescue. Once in Italy, the migrants are screened for asylum, and if they don't qualify, they're sent back home. Many of the refugees often end up in Northern Europe's larger and more organized immigrant communities. The latest tragedy is bound to stoke the political debate on how to cope with the refugees and their plight. An observatory that tracks migrant deaths says almost 7,000 people have died on that route in the Canal of Sicily since 1994. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
Strong winds and heavy rains are pounding India's eastern seaboard as the area braces for Cyclone Failene. Packing winds of more than 220 kilometers per hour. It's one of the most powerful storms ever to hit India. Some 600,000 people have been evacuated from the coast to higher ground. Storm surge, a giant wall of water that a cyclone blasts ashore, is a big killer in these storms. Meteorologists are hoping that while Failene hits, it does so in a weakened state. But even if it does, it's forecast to be large and deadly.
The United States has just 5 days to solve the government's debt woes to avoid a possible default. And from all signs, there is hope an agreement can be reached by the October 17th deadline, now that President Barack Obama and Republicans are negotiating.
Good faith efforts to keep the U.S. Treasury from defaulting and ending a partial government shutdown were witnessed by all parties involved, starting with President Barack Obama.
And the president appreciates the constructive approach that we've been seeing, and that is certainly a change and a welcome change. And he hopes that an agreement can be reached.
For the second time in less than 24 hours, Obama spoke with House Speaker John Boehner to negotiate acceptable terms on both sides.
Let's put this hysterical talk of default behind us and instead start talking about finding solutions to the problems.
Word has it, Republicans are sticking to their guns about including cuts in benefit programs and changes to Obama's health care law. Whatever it takes, says the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, which insists essential services are critically affected over the shutdown.
14 accidents have occurred in which we have not dispatched investigators.
Russia has now urged Washington to fix its budget problems before it plagues the global economy. Russia's finance minister explains 45% of Russia's foreign exchange reserves are invested in U.S. Treasury securities. Leaders of the World Bank and the IMF also urged the U.S. government to control its debts. Signs that Obama and Republicans will reach a deal soon sent U.S. stocks higher. Both the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 gained ground yesterday.
Libya's prime minister says his brief abduction by gunmen on Thursday was an attempted coup by Islamist political rivals. Ali Zaidan lashed out against the unruly militias and said they were trying to turn Libya into another Afghanistan or Somalia. Zaidan has been struggling with the militias since being named by Parliament a year ago to lead the first democratically formed government since dictator Muammar Gaddafi's ouster and death back in 2011. Meanwhile, dozens of armed groups protested in the city of Benghazi yesterday. They denounced the U.S. raid last weekend that led to the capture of a Libyan accused of involvement in the 1998 al-Qaeda bombings of 2 American embassies in Africa. Anas al-Libi was seized by special forces outside his home in Tripoli and taken to a U.S. warship.
There are now growing concerns that more people are leaving Hong Kong than settling in the city. Zella Chin tells us more about the brain drain.
This Canadian IT professional worked in Hong Kong for 8 years. Last year, Jason Tsao was promoted to a role covering Greater China and Southeast Asia. He could have remained in the city, but he chose to move to Singapore.
Family-wise, it's much better to live there. After I come home, the kids will be running around in the apartments, which they wouldn't be able to do in our apartments in Hong Kong.
Jason's part of a recent exodus of expats and some locals. Official stats don't differentiate between the two groups. 4,000 more people left the city than settled here in the year to June 2013. Experts say this is a trend of talented individuals leaving for a better lifestyle and better opportunities. It's called a brain drain.
In the past, people left after pivotal events of upheaval, the Tiananmen crackdown in 1989, the outbreak of SARS in 2003, and the global financial crisis in 2008. And the recent exodus? This economist says the city never really recovered from the financial crisis.
After the global financial crisis, we can see that the investment bank sector, it is really declining. All the markets going down. So people just going out of Hong Kong to look for the better jobs.
Another factor has been the robust growth in mainland China. This retail bank moved some of its Hong Kong staff north of the border as it started building the China business in 2007.
With the free trade zone in Shanghai, with the Qianhai Special Development Area, those are kind of factors that I think will draw on the Hong Kong talent base.
Young predicts far-reaching consequences if the outflow continues.
When Hong Kong has the talent outflow brain drains, so it means that Hong Kong's competitiveness is going down. The importance of Hong Kong might gradually fade out, not only compared with Shanghai, compared with the Guangdong and Guangzhou.
Zella Chen, TVB News.
For more on the story, tune into Money Magazine tomorrow at 7 p.m. here on Pearl.
To other news now, the hospital authority has denied suggestions it tried to cover up a superbug outbreak at Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Rachel Lung reports.
Due to an outbreak last month of a drug-resistant bug, staff at Queen Elizabeth Hospital have been busy testing patients. Some 40 patients there are reported to have been infected with the bacteria. The hospital authority's chief executive Dr. Leung Pek-yin says it would be difficult to completely stop the outbreak due to many factors, such as a genetic mutation of the bacteria. In addition, people traveling in and out of Hong Kong may be carrying the germ. But he rejected accusations that authorities tried to cover up the outbreak. He said there might have been delays in announcing the figures because verifying them took time, but the authority constantly updates the number of confirmed cases and related information online. Leung also pointed out the challenges facing the hospital authority over the next few years.
And something that we need to do in the coming 3 years is about whether we are having gaps in our services. At the moment, we are focused a lot on acute services, but we are seeing that there are other subacute service and rehab service, convalescent services are quite lag behind international standard.
And he hopes to be able to stabilize the manpower situation. Rachel Lang, TVB News.
And that's an exciting wrap of our news.
Happy guys.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Good night.